apply video to pyrrho, probably. I'll do it in little pieces and stitch them together, I guess, and keep it under half an hour. But it just, you can't pay attention to save his life. So I mean, right off the bat, all wrong. And you know, let's go back to my crappy drawing. But I mean, I said electrons so many times in the video, so many. He just doesn't pay any attention.
The width of the slits and the distance between the slits. And it can't be the electric and magnetic forces between positive and negative, because photons don't have a charge, but they show the same.
Photons don't have a charge. It's just brilliant. Yeah, I only said I drew the electrons. I drew the electrons bulging. I drew the electrons moving when the photons hit them. The whole thing is that they hit electrons. I said over and over, photons travel in a straight line till they hit an electron. I quoted Feynman saying that. How can he get it this wrong? There's no excuse for getting it this wrong. Such a fucking idiot.
Pattern relative to their own wavelength. The only difference is their wavelength for light we can measure is usually a lot shorter. I mean, a lot longer than the wavelength of a particle because of the greater
the wavelength of a particle. I mean, another one, just amazing. You know, electrons don't have a wavelength. We create their wavelength.
Energy in the particle.
By shooting more of them.
Now, Gary said that
Idiot.
firing the gun once every 5 seconds,
again, if you're just going to keep not paying attention, I don't really care about the frequency of the light. As I pointed out, yes, it affects how far the electron moves. I said it right there. This is how far the electron moves, depends on the frequency of the light. It's in the video, asshole. You just can't pay attention. God, he constantly does this. You can't ever, 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 ever get somebody else's argument correct. Alright. I'll play this and see how far I get. I'll try to take notes. I'll try not to do this, but you know, when he's just totally stupid, I'm gonna play his stupidity. Yeah, I might as well play this bit. I mean, he's doing this stupid, whatever it is, computer drawing shit, just wasting so much fucking time. Yeah, like nobody has anything better to do than, you know, do it the slowest way possible. Brilliant. Anyway, so he says, he brings up the photon again, that there's, you know, photons don't have a frequency, a single photon. And that's my whole point. My whole point is we call it a photon, but a photon has to have at least 2 tons in it. I've only said that dozens of times now in these videos, so obviously you haven't watched any of the videos, because obviously you don't understand that simple concept, that obviously a photon, when we say it's 1 photon, it's not 1 photon, it's at least 2 tons. Ugh. And then he talks about his stupid 1 wave. How does your 1 wave have a frequency? So how does a single wave go to a slit and still have a frequency? Can't have a frequency as a single wave. So exactly how does the single photon manifest its frequency? So the frequency has to be part of the photon somehow. So you haven't explained exactly how that is. So, and then he showed a picture of diffraction rings, as if I've only brought this up so many times about Newton. And but then you guys, he says diffraction rings, and he shows the picture, and it's clearly the same interference pattern. If you just take it out and cut a bar out of the round circle, it's exactly the same pattern, on off, on off, on off. It's an interference pattern. So he's just going to pretend that it's not interference when it's exactly the same pattern.
That this wavefront is in effect is doing this kind of thing.
Right, this is a single photon. So let's just understand his argument that it is that a single photon has a huge giant thing in front of it, a straight wave, with an infinite number of little wavelets. So this is what he calls his explanation of physics. And he has some evidence of this. And the evidence is, well, if I do it this way, it works. So if I just make up a bunch of crap, it just gets worse and worse. Okay, so now he uses an analogy of a rock in a pond and states that, you know, the wave front gets straight as you go far enough away. For it to get straight for a single photon at the slit, it would have to be like 1 billion times this invisible wave, the photon, the single photon is producing. It would have to be billions of times the size of the photon away from the slit. It have to travel that far. Anyway, at what speed, I imagine? Who knows? And then again, these are. He said this is a good explanation. So he thinks in physics it's a good explanation to think there's an infinite number of wavelets. And then when this breaks off, there's an infinite number here. Obviously this is 2 times infinite, or 20 times infinite, or infinite times infinite. So the very idea that serious physicists would use something, a contrivance like this, and then say it's a good explanation when it has an infinity in it, which is just an infinity in a confined space. And that's not a problem. That's a good explanation. That's scientific. So then he says, okay, so the single photon creates a big giant straight wave. It keeps propagating through an infinite number of little waves. Yeah, this is what they think happens. Then it breaks off, and when it breaks off, all the little waves get loose, especially on the ends here, when the end ones get loose, and they create the interference pattern. But what Pyrrho keeps saying is the light goes here and the light goes here. It's one single photon, remember? He doesn't even remember his own argument. This is not a wave of light. This is the wave created by a single photon. So obviously the light can't go to these places. You have to say the wave packet goes there. So you can't even get your own rhetoric right. You're bitching at me because I won't use your magic words, and here you are saying shit that doesn't work at all, idiot. Just point out also that he said parameciums have been on Earth for 4 billion years the other day. This is a guy who hangs on everybody else's words. Anyway, so I'll play a little. I mean, this is just retarded. It's just such a, you know.
Have this whole contribution.
It's slow. Yeah, this is the speed he's running at here.
From over here, this line. Since it doesn't have this contribution of this light gray blue part, those wavelets are all gone. Therefore, this part it was adding to gets dimmer. The same way with this other side. So you see some, that's where the diffraction lines come from. That's our explanation of the single slit diffraction.
Okay.
So for example...
yeah, well, like even though MIT professors will tell you it's not diffraction, it's an interference pattern. And obviously I would say, no, it's all diffraction. But, you know, so his argument is that the infinite number of wavelets gets cut to an infinite number of wavelets, and this infinite number of wavelets doesn't have enough infinite wavelets to maintain the pattern, so it somehow breaks the pattern in specific locations. Because this is missing and this is missing, you get a dotted line here, which wouldn't happen. So he's not even understanding his own gimmick. The gimmick is they realize is that they can create an odd by saying that all the ones in between here all cancel out, and the only ones that don't cancel out are the two end ones, and they let the two end ones be the mathematically relevant points. So that's how they create the two photons to interfere with each other. One photon goes in, they make it into two photons to do the math. if they do the explicit calculus, which would be to take all of these wavelets into account, you know, apparently to take you a couple of days to do the math, but apparently you get the same result. I'm not testing it.
That, if you shoot a laser through a little tiny pinhole, which is, you know, two-dimensional slit.
Right, I don't need this instruction. I don't know what it has to do with anything, but I'm the one pointing out that single slit diffraction was known about since Newton's time, this idea. So there was nothing miraculous about the two-slit experiment. Nobody should have paid any attention, because of course you would expect there to be a bar pattern. There's a bar pattern with a single slit. Why wouldn't there be a bar pattern with a double slit? I'm just saying, this is the fraud of this whole thing. Why are two slits significant when a single slit is doing that? It's a real question. You want to try to answer it? How could the two slit experiment possibly be interesting if the single slit experiment is doing that? I guess the physicists weren't thinking. I think that's all it comes down to. They forgot about diffraction.
The slit in both horizontal and vertical and angular, every direction.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, right? So all you do is cut a bar right out of here, and it looks just like the single slit diffraction bar pattern. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure that one out.
The slit, you see these interference lines from this fucking effect. And the mathematics is perfect. It has nothing to do with the magnetism of the edges.
Well, again, you say so. I'm saying that it's a more reasonable explanation for why light is bent. You're saying that your explanation of an infinite wavelets created by a single photon not only creates a huge giant wavefront, but this huge giant wavefront that can gap, you know, lengths, you know, many times its size. It's like me creating a wavefront in front of me that was the size of New Jersey, and then that wavefront creates a whole bunch of little, an infinite number of little waves in front of it to create another wavefront in front of that. That's your frickin' theory. And it's nonsense. It's idiotically complex. Photons do that. Dumb electrons can't do all that kind of fancy stuff, but a photon can. Well, you know, you think electrons are doing it too, which is really ludicrous. It's, again, your inability to see the difference between a paramecium and a human being, and the difference between a photon and a fucking electron. They're not going to have the same properties, idiot. And as you've noted, photons you can't bend them with magnetism. You can't bend them with charge. So they've got to be fundamentally different elements. Anyway, just too fucking stupid. Alright, so he says again the wavelength of the wave, and it's a single photon. So he still hasn't explained how the photon expresses its wavelength. Then he says something about how, you know, I have some kind of faith in something, which it has nothing to do with faith, it has to do with reasoning. And my faith is in Feynman diagrams, and the Feynman principle, that photons hit electrons, electrons jiggle, and then the photon is released in a new vector. Now, that's my faith. Yeah, so anyway. So the whole point of this was for him to demonstrate how my theory can't work. And so the extent of his debunk so far is photons can't be affected by field energy, which I expressly stated that they can't be, and that I said the photons are hitting electrons, and I said it repeatedly. I talked about electron pumps. So he's doing absolutely nothing to debunk my counter theory to his made-up mush. And then he says the math predicts with the experimental results, and my counter argument again is no, it doesn't. And if you do the experiment, because the math doesn't account for the light source, if you put a light source in like a laser light, you'll get a very different pattern than you will with domed light, in the sense that the pattern will stay brighter. All the bars will be bright. where if you use dome light, they diminish quickly at the ends, which seems quite logical. So fuck you, you're wrong again. And that also is, in my opinion, pretty good evidence of the fact that the photons going near the surface of the slit, the ones the furthest from the center, are the ones with the least number of photons arriving in that location, which would mean the ones that are closer to the slit are diffracted more. Stupid fuck. Anyway, just nothing. He's just doing the same old shit. He misparaphrases what MIT is teaching as a counter-argument to my theory. So he doesn't counter-argue my theory. He just sits there and badly teaches one-slit diffraction.
Based on the width of the slit and the width of the wavelength of the wave. Yeah, you're fooling yourself. You wish that it didn't work out, but you could do the math.
And so again, he just keeps arguing as if the diffraction principle doesn't exactly create an on-off pattern. Of course it would. If if there's field lines and the lines are going to decide where a photon goes, and it's going to go at a certain angle on each field line, then yeah, it would make perfect sense that it would be an on-off pattern then. Exactly the number of field lines would create exactly the number of bars. Asshole.
You know JavaScript. That is sufficient to write a program that simulates the math.
Again, simulates math is not my objective. Modeling the truth is the objective, asshole. Again, the fact that the variables are creating the product is a no-brainer. Of course, the width of the slit matters. Newton didn't say any hole makes a diffraction pattern. No, he said it had to be a small aperture. Duh. Okay, and the wavelength of the light matters. Duh. No one's contesting any of that, you fucking cunt.
I would even help you with it.
Oh, fuck you in the ass till dead. Oh, I'll be back.
So, do you understand
No, I don't understand a damn fucking thing. You're so full of fucking shit. Your obligation is to explain how I'm wrong, asshole. I've already explained how you assholes are full of shit because it's all made up. How you don't have a single fucking fact to back up this stupid made-up invisible fucking infinite wave shit. It's an invisible man showing up at trial and testifying that he did the murder in his non-audible voice. So yeah, I'll go to trial and I'll have the invisible man who can't be heard testify. Fuck you. Oh, it's just so tedious. Anyway, it's just no point. He has once again referenced that photons are not charged, and my video is just covered in electrons. Photons hit electrons. I said it so many times, didn't pay any attention. All right. So he still thinks that, okay, so in the one single slit, this fake Huygens wave goes through the slit, and somehow because the two sides of the wave are cut off, that creates the banding. We didn't even explain the interference. Didn't draw it, didn't show it, nothing. So that was not useful. As a minor point, him talking about moving the slit in the two-slit experiment, which has the least effect on the actual pattern. And just not much of a concession to the point that, yes, the more relevant to the subject would be just to point out that what's happening mathematically for the mathematics is the internal impediment is getting bigger. All right. These are, okay, this is experiments you can do. Well, only to a point. I mean, quite obviously I don't have anything that can shoot buckyballs. I don't think science has anything either. But anyway, I have done the experiment, but I don't have to do it. I can just see where other people have done it. And we're not arguing about the experiment. We're arguing about what causes the effect. And so you still don't seem to understand that. So anyway, again, even said something, you have to cut laser slits or something. No, you don't. You can do it with soot. Soot is enough matter. You know, soot's carbon, by the way, a conductor, paramagnetic, essentially. Diffraction versus interference. So again, he just keeps talking as if there's something called diffraction versus the interference pattern, and the pattern is the same. You're just talking about the pattern. Whether you call it diffraction or you call it interference, you're stuck with the pattern. And there's nothing in diffraction, that is reflections off surfaces, that would cause this effect, unless you're talking about reflections on when you change mediums and travel through a medium and then back out of a medium. But otherwise, those are all reflections. Anyway, so yeah, so he started talking about shooting bullets, and they went all the way to buckyballs, right? So, and again, this is just how he argues. He just throws a bunch of shit out there, like this is all proven and established. So, by his theory, if he's saying buckyballs do the same thing, which they don't, the experiments are a little hard to get details on. And apparently the pattern is not very good, which would be consistent with my theory. There's, quite obviously, buckyballs aren't going to be quite as influenced by the field because of their mass. But so what would your argument then is? Your argument is that buckyballs have a Huygens field around them, and that they go through the slit as a wave, a flat wave. Each buckyball has a flat wave traveling in front of it. And that flat wave Huygens, and then tells the buckyball where to go. Is that your fucking argument? Because how else does the buckyball do it in a single slit experiment? Where does the buckyball get its frequency from? Each individual, one buckyball at a time. Yeah, explain that. Good luck. Right, so then he ended with the photons don't have a charge thing again. So I'm a long way from done. I'm not even halfway through this piece of shit. Again, not a single argument against what I am arguing. So I make a video explaining how I say it happens. And all he does is keep telling me what they say happens. Which I've already explained why I don't think is a good explanation. Because it's made out of unprovable crap. Anyway. I guess I'll have to play this bit. Alright, well anyway, first he makes this, it's again, can't stay on the subject, so he starts bringing up gravitational lensing, and he claims the evidence can't be denied. So that's his argument. You know, it's undeniable evidence. And the fact that there's none of these black holes lensing anything, we have no pictures of a black hole lensing anywhere in the entire universe. So there's huge gravitational bodies out there, yet they never lens anything. I mean, it's just such a crock of shit. Anyway, and so he's claiming I'm saying they're all masquerading and they're all frauds. No, they're all ignorant. Physicists never look at any of this stuff. They go to their lectures, they're told the lies, and then they believe the lies. The Feynman, like I said, you go back to the Feynman lectures. You know, what else can I say? They're inaccurate, grotesquely inaccurate about what happens. He does this stupid same talk as you. He starts talking about bullets, and then he does the drawing with the two big humps, like single slits don't diffract light, and we already know they do. It's all a fraud. Oh, this was stupid.
Creating two waves. You're subtracting this hypothetical, and it's not infinite either. In math, it's infinite. There's an infinite number of
yeah, like that makes a lot of sense. In math, it's infinite. Yeah, your math is just so brilliant.
Of wavelengths. But in water, it goes down to the size of the molecules of the water and how the molecules of the water bump into each other. So that's where...
So he's saying Huygens is happening in water where it clearly isn't. And clearly, that's the whole point. You just keep not paying attention to. Water does not create a diffraction pattern with a single slit. The only way you can create a diffraction pattern is to create interference in the water before it even gets to the slit. You have to create the diffraction before the water goes through the slit. If you take a plain dripping drop of water and take a single slit, you'll get no interference pattern.
It doesn't become infinite because there's no more wavelets than there are molecules of water. And to simulate a wavelet, you would actually use a whole column or area volume of water. So there would be a finite number, though it's arbitrary where you count the center of those. So you use continuous mathematics, calculus, and when you cut off all of those extra wavelets, every little point along that wavefront that gets blocked by the mask in the single slit version of this, then subtracts.
Yeah, well, it would subtract just as evenly on both sides, and I'm just saying that's still not going to explain the dark spots. It's not going to explain why light doesn't hit a place. The stuff that's still there should still be hitting, so it doesn't explain why there's no light.
From what can hit the screen. And because they're going on in the circles that the semicircles, the ripples that you yourself drew, they contribute at an angle. And if you take them away, then they're going to darken things at angles.
It's not about darkening, it's about not being any light, okay? The dark bands are dark bands. They're dark. They're not a little bit light, they're dark.
The reason it goes dark and light, excuse me, is also because of the interference mathematics.
Who's arguing that it has to do with the mathematics in the sense that the mathematics is accounting for the distance that they're saying they're establishing a distance and then just taking an angular off the parallel and using that as a phase shift. So this is already known. But I'm arguing the same thing is happening. You can find lots of explanations for how that would happen. And my argument that there would be a consistency between how close the slits are and how much the electrons spread, or that is how straight the field lines get, there's a parallel relationship between those two things. So it's the same difference, jackass.
And again, you could write a JavaScript program that would run.
Well, I'm just not going to do all this. I don't need to write a JavaScript program to duplicate the fucking... I'm not disputing the pattern, shithead. You are, actually. You're the one claiming that water creates a diffraction pattern in a single slit when it doesn't. I'm not the one who has the patterns wrong, shit for brain. I don't need to see the pattern, jackass. I've seen it a million times. Oh, God. We're talking about the cause of it, shithead. Anyway, alright, so it seems all he wants to do now is change the subject, like always. So I did make a little reference about atoms, a little tiny reference in the video, and of course he has to bring that up, and what keeps the atoms, the electrons from crashing into the protons if they're not spinning around the atom, and all that kind of crap. And yeah, I'm not going into that here or now, and it's not really important. I mean, even if one made these into indestructible entities, the fact is, just like with magnets, one magnet could stick to another magnet. It doesn't have to be spinning around. It doesn't get absorbed by the other magnet. It just sits on the surface of the other magnet. Not that amazing. But yes, of course, there are neutrons inside of atoms, and they're probably the player. But anyway, what else? Damn, I can't see what this is. Bullets or something. I don't know. Oh yeah, he did another one of his terrible drawings, and so he's showing how bullets would be bouncing off the surface. But of course the bullets wouldn't be coming in at sharp angles. They'd be coming there. The bullets are being shot into narrow slits, of course. You know, slits that are only a few widths of a bullet thick. And so whatever reflection there would be, it'd be tiny reflections, not big reflections. Angle of incident in, angle of incident out. Idiot. Jesus, fucked hard. The reason why bullets scatter is because bullets aren't indestructible and the surface of the slit isn't indestructible, so of course they don't reflect perfectly. But we're not talking about imperfect reflections, are we? No. And remember, reflections aren't really reflections. They're absorptions and readmissions. Feynman will tell you that. Amazing. He doesn't even pay attention to his own icons. An interesting one, though, is they brought up BBs through a magnet. And that does make for an interesting experiment. You know, have a magnetic field, put magnetic BBs through. Obviously, there's field lines, so BBs that hit the field lines, you would surmise, would probably not be affected as much as the BBs who are in between the field lines, let's say, in terms of the path strength of the field energy. So that's a Maxwellian thing and blah, blah, blah. So there would be spots, and so it just would be a much weaker pattern, but you would just surmise there could be some pattern. But the other problem is that gravity, like magnetism, is conservative. So the pull in, is going to, complement the pull out, the resistance as it leaves, and that's going to change the path. So as it, it's getting pulled in, but as it leaves and slows down as it's doing so, it's going to bend the path. After it already bent it in, it's going to kind of twist it out as it leaves. And obviously you wouldn't fire the BBs faster than the field strength, so they would be rolling BBs, not shooting BBs. But it would be an experiment worth doing, because I think there's ways you could do it to reveal that the BBs tend to end up in a proportional relationship to the magnetic field lines between the two magnets you're rolling them through. So that would be a great experiment to do. I'll have to see if I can make a setup that will actually permit me to roll BBs at exactly the same speed and all that, but it would make for an interesting experiment. Because you have sort of so I'll draw a picture of it just for the sake of it again. What's being stated here is these field lines, there's electrons on them, and what the electrons are doing is they can jump between field lines, just go like that, or what they're going to do is travel the path of the field line through their acceleration, and then they'll readmit the photon in a straight line. So it's kind of like thinking of a body entering gravity that always has an arrow in front of it, and that its energy is not going to be a continuous. So it gets its energy, and then it's going to find a position and stop and readmit the photon in the direction it was last going. And so it kind of breaks conservation rules, because you're only grabbing the part of the field that the electron is moving in or accelerating through, and the rest of the time the photon is not being affected by the gravity. So you have to kind of think of it as that the velocity of the Earth is not permanent, and so it's just jerking, and it's jerking in that parabola, and so it's changing its direction from this way to a little subtle parabolic change in its direction, and then the UFO or whatever leaves in the direction it was going. And obviously that's only taking one clip of gravity, and that's a little different than what a magnet's going to do, because it's not going to be allowed to do that. Release your energy, allow it to go through the gravity without being affected, and then be affected again. It can't. It's not doing the same thing electrons is doing, is all I'm saying, quite obviously. But again, he hasn't even acknowledged the fundamental point of my theory, is that the photons are hitting electrons around the material, and you just ignored it entirely. Yeah, asshole. Yeah, I guess we could play some.
That they won't say what kind of light is going in through the slits, and they're out of control, and it's a cone light. It's like a flashlight from Home Depot. No.
Okay, so this is the funny part, right? Because in the old days, that's exactly what it was. All the Feynman diagram, Feynman will tell you it's a tiny aperture, and the light is coned. Okay, that's Feynman. Feynman says the light goes, random light goes into an aperture, tiny aperture, so they can even it out in a cone. It goes to the two slits. That's traditional two-slit experiment. Always had an aperture that the light went through. It's always explained that way. Yes, now we have lasers, which is a completely different kind of light. Now the irony is the math is exactly the same. Now obviously the intensity of the banding is going to be different with cone light versus perfectly coherent light. Light with an even intensity is going to create a subtly different pattern than light with an uneven intensity, and that's just a fact. And the fact is that nobody does these experiments. Nobody sits there and does the two-slit experiment and then measures the pattern on the board and sees if the math matches. Nobody does it. And it's all kind of arbitrary anyway, because the only way they do the reduction in intensity is by the same factor. So they actually label the bands and then multiply by the label, divide by the label to reduce the intensity. So it's kind of arbitrary. But anyway. clearly not, clearly if the math has stayed the same and you change the light going in, and you claim your results are identical, something's wrong. Alright, just try to finish this up. So he just kept reiterating the impossibility of any other mechanism being responsible. The wave pattern is explicitly a wave pattern. It can't be created by any other mechanism. Even though it's this, as I keep repeating, the simplest pattern you can describe as a pattern is on-off. There's lots of examples of things that are on-off mechanisms and have nothing to do with waves. But it just keeps saying it's the only possible interpretation. It never really accounts for the fact that water waves don't create the pattern, you know, with a single slit. I could deny it all I want, whatever it is I'm denying. They're all keeping a secret. That's not my argument. My argument is they haven't analyzed any of this stuff. They accept the axioms and the premises and they act on them, just like any other kind of religious person. And if they don't, you know, if they don't read, you know, Darwin, then yeah, they don't know any better. The ideas are insane, so it's literally now insane to propose some other mechanism being responsible. You know, it's just, you know, I am going to emphasize some of this Maxwellian stuff in the future also, but you can sort of see when the lines do exactly on-off. This is an on-off pattern, quite obviously, if projected on a surface. Right here, this is an on-off pattern, if projected on a surface. These are magnetic field lines, so electrons are going to line up differently than magnets will, but the idea is the same. They're going to be force balanced into positions, and you know, you can just show these on-off patterns all over the place. So this is waves. This is not caused in any kind of mechanical way. This is all wave mechanics. Alright, anyway. Well, except single slit, yeah, it says they're all the same as light, and yet, except the single slit in waves aren't the same. So he just keeps saying you can use wave mechanic math. Well, that's right. If you turn light into waves, you can use wave mechanic math. But if you don't do that, you can't. Alright. So he says, I have some confusion about electrons, and no, of course I don't. You've just ignored my argument that of course electrons are going to be affected by the field, and they are field, and quite obviously electrons do not create a nice clean pattern, or people would be showing electron patterns. But yes, there's pattern. But yes, of course, if electrons are lining up and electrons shoot into a bunch of electrons, they're going to bounce into the electrons and move the electrons, yes. Again, more impossibility. There's no other explanation. Even though it's the simplest pattern in the universe, no other explanation. It has to be a wave pattern. Yeah. You know, he keeps arguing that this is the most reliable math, and again, it relies on the whole Huygens thing that you can't use in the double slit, because if you use it, well, you can't use it the same way in the double slit. You have to always kind of engineer the math to the circumstance, and I guess I'll have to show the mathematical errors just to demonstrate. I mean, I can show you what the pattern the math predicts, and then I can show you the real pattern. And in a two-slit experiment, and they're not the same. Fuck. You know, it is doable. It's really not my job, as they say. So he just derades, you know, just complains that, you know, this idea of using a fish analogy, where I use a school analogy, that if you had a collection of entities and you gave them a consistent speed and a direction that you could sort of understand, for the body to move, there has to be more elements in the body moving in the direction of the movement. And just to make it simple so it can be understood that it's, you know, movement in is movement out, force in, acceleration out, that it's a conservative system. So he just mocks anybody doing those kind of, anybody attempting to simplify anything. Is, you know, committing a crime. So what's, it's just so obnoxious. Photons are random. Yeah, so he said photons don't come out of electrons in any kind of consistent manner. They're random. Feynman wouldn't say that. Feynman diagrams were about diagramming non-random events, not random events. So again, he's in conflict with his god, Feynman. So that's really enough. There's a few seconds left in the video. I can play a little bit maybe, and the camera's probably going to run out of battery. So enjoy.
Thousands of scientists internationally, from China.
Right, so I'm saying all the scientists are lying. No, what I'm saying is that the scientists have never studied this. They never researched it. They never looked into it. They just accept these things. You're telling me that the dark matter has somehow been researched by somebody and somebody knows what it means. No, they've just accepted, okay, that's an explanation. We'll use that. So they accept Huygens. They don't research Huygens.
To Berkeley, Paris, everybody in the whole world, right?
Well, look, there's no denying it. I mean, I could play you every documentary on the internet about the two-slit experiment. You wanted me to go back to Dr. Quantum, the most popular physics video on YouTube, and explain to you how it's a misrepresentation of the facts? How the facts don't match up with what he says happened? The experiments haven't even been conducted that are being referenced? How many times do I have to prove that there's a ton of bullshit in the propaganda? Again, every time somebody references the two-slit experiment, aren't they sort of lying? I just showed in a video how a guy just made a video pointing out how single slits just create blobs on the other side. Is that the truth? Or is that a misrepresentation of the fucking truth? Will you ever address any of these criticisms? Ever?
Just everybody. The Russian scientists were colluding with the Americans back in the Cold War on a big international conspiracy stronger than...
Let's understand, there's not a single argument in this whole fucking stupid video that shows how disproving even as a proof of concept. He hasn't made one fucking comment relevant to my theory. Hasn't in any way, except for the distortion of saying my theory was saying that photons are affected by fields. When I said exactly the opposite explicitly, when I aggressively stated into this camera that you could put a zillion, billion megavolts into the fucking Hadron Collider, and you're never going to move a photon. Didn't I say that, shithead? Yeah, I did, you liar.
And any nationalism or any other world phenomena, really? That's ludicrous.
So let's just understand, he just didn't pay any attention. I made it clear that the photons are hitting electrons in the field. They're not going through the field, they're hitting electrons in the field. I said it, I drew it, and he still pretends I didn't do that, and I did that, and he's just a fucking misrepresentator of the truth. It's the same as lying in my opinion, because it's so fucking, every fucking video is a misrepresentation of what was said.
You keep saying that one slit is the same pattern. It's not. It's a different pattern.
Well, again, that's not what I said. I said it's the same, conceptually the same pattern. It's an on-off pattern. It's representative of interference. And if, again, I've played the clip. You want me to play Professor Lewin at MIT saying they shouldn't be using the word diffraction because it's the same fucking pattern.
When you finally write your JavaScript simulations, you'll see that there are different patterns. But there's light and dark spots. Yeah.
I'm not writing JavaScript to do the two-slit experiment. I'm going to do a JavaScript demonstrating gravity, retard.
All light, all images are light and dark spots in a certain color, which is the wavelength. Good for you. They're all the same. This picture would be now. It's the same as this picture would be now because it's light and dark spots. The patterns are different between diffraction and the interference of two slits. What is it? It's the overlap of both diffraction patterns. And they're adding up and subtracting. Duh.
It's not in your math, asshole. Okay, so why don't you, for a change, actually put up the formula. Show me the fucking formula that creates this pattern. Show me the formula that predicts these breaks. Right here. Go ahead. Show me the fucking formula that does that, you fucking cunt.
One slit makes some little rings, subtle rings, and two slits adds an extra set of rings. Okay, you're not going to understand why I said rings, but dark bands. rings because of this fucking circular example with the pinhole, which is a lot more physically apt. And you say, I'm advocating waves made of nothing. No, I'm advocating the...
And again, this doesn't happen with a single slit in water.
That's what's real, is the waves that are making the wave patterns. And you're like, the waves making the wave patterns don't exist. Instead, it's something that makes me feel better. I feel better with my fish swimming in a particular circular but still other direction.
Yeah, so again, the fish has nothing, that has to do with inertia, and velocity has nothing to do with the two-slit experiment. But go ahead, play your game, asshole.
That feels solider, just like a flat earth does, or whatever. Therefore, for it to be true, thousands and thousands of our smartest people in the world just been in a big conspiracy.
No, it's been a conspiracy. They're tripping over their own IQs and their own egos. That's it. So again, if the truth is, like I said, this is a 300-year-old idea that was rejected because they couldn't really imagine physics went, kinetic and it went frictionless. So yeah, they just didn't imagine that. So one lack of imagination is the only reason why particle gravity didn't win the day. One. But in every other respect, it fits all the math. Every single bit of it.
Just lie to me. Fucking stupid. Stupid idea, Gary. You really should. Bro, you could still have your science.
Well, the good thing is, like I said, I've saved a copy of this video, all right, and I'm gonna make sure that you're understood for what you are. You're a regressive, arrogant, obnoxious, ignorant, fucking religious kook. A dogmatarian. You have a dogma. You didn't fucking argue anything I argued for. Instead, you just kept preaching your Jesus theory, which I've already debunked as completely contradictory.
Theories. Except for you couldn't, because that's all it's built on, right? It's not that you're interested in science. It's some weird way of proving...
Right, and the scientists who are interested in science who say, this is the single slit experiment. See, look, it's just blobby. And they don't pay any attention to, if you make the slit a tiny bit wider, this is what it does. No, they're the honest people in physics. Yeah, fuck you.
Your intuition is always right. And you'll never even reach it. You're going to run in that direction. You know you're never going to do the math or any of the stuff, and yet you don't care. You already feel confident. You don't have to succeed at any of the tests or trials.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying the only math I got to fix is the math that you've gotten wrong, okay? Which is, I can explain why this gets progressively weaker and why it isn't infinite. By your theory, this should be infinite. So if I put a photographic plate over here, I should be collecting a whole bunch of photons. Well, I bet you won't.
Of having such a system, you already have won. We should already treat you like you won the race. That you, from my point of view, haven't even started. It's like, 100 years ago, people said, whoa, let's go look at that. And they walked that way and then started going faster, and they're running that way. And you're like, oh, fuck time. And you're running this other way. And you said you've won the race. You're not even going in the right direction. You can't even you don't even understand. You go,
right, again, an hour and 10 minutes, he debunked not a single thing I argued for in my video. His only debunk was photons aren't moved by fields, which I wasn't even arguing. And I was explicitly and aggressively arguing against the notion that they would.
I explain. You go, well, that didn't make any sense. Well, that might be the important part of what I'm saying, the part you don't understand. That would maybe explain what I'm trying to explain to you. Maybe when you say I keep saying the same thing, the part where you go, well, that didn't make any sense. Who knows what that meant? Maybe that could be the part that you're missing about what I'm telling you. Because I'm not even saying that I'm right. I'm saying I think I'm right.
Yeah, I'm not even saying I'm right. Well, then what are you bothering for? It's about the evidence. Now, you either say the evidence is strong for something or it's not. You keep saying it's impossible to have any other theory. That's what you said. It's impossible.
But I can remember your position. You had no idea of what you're even arguing against. You think the scientists are saying, here's the photon and the wave's out in front and there's an infinite number of them?
No, I don't even care. The very idea that a photon has anything in front of it is ludicrously stupid.
No, nobody says anything that could even be remotely thought of that way. That could be one of those lies that you tell when it's like, well...
Again, irrelevant. I don't care. I don't care. The photon has 2 waves in front of it, or 10 waves, or 1,000,000 waves. That's not the point. The point is it doesn't have a flat wave in front of it.
And you said the photon has an electron depends on gravity. Yeah, showing you pictures as obvious as around Earth. It's like, oh no, but those pictures are from out in space. They're all vectors.
Yeah, so I've never claimed
Right,
that they were doctored. I'm claiming you can look at them for what they are. You don't have to doctor them to demonstrate how flawed they are.
Whatever.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know why the video's not playing, so fuck it. But yeah, fuck this asshole. Jesus. Now, no point, right? I'm not gonna squeak through an hour and 11 minutes of him just reciting what the Pope says. I already know all this shit he's saying. He's not enlightening me with anything that I haven't already even referenced in my own videos. What he's not doing is addressing my counter argument. Oh, fuck.